And hi and welcome. Hope you've enjoyed watching Jump Shot, the story of Kenny Sailors. And we're going to keep the conversation going here. Let me introduce our panel of experts and folks you're going to enjoy hearing from, talking about the movie, giving their thoughts, their input on the film Jump Shot. Joining us is Baylor President Linda Livingstone, a former Division I women's basketball player herself at Oklahoma State. President Livingstone, welcome to you. We appreciate you being with us tonight. Kim Mulkey, women's basketball coach at Baylor and a member of the Naismith Hall of Fame. Coach, we'll be interested in your thoughts having watched the film this evening as well. Scott Drew, the men's basketball coach at Baylor. Coach, it's a really good story. Be interested in your thoughts tonight. Nina Davis joins us. Nina is a former Baylor standout, now working as a Fox Sports production assistant in LA, but currently joining us from Memphis, her hometown of Memphis tonight. Nina, it's great to see you. And then we have the director of Jump Shot, Jacob Hamilton, joining us tonight. Jacob, great to see you. And producer of the film, Waco and Ty Nathan Clark, is with us tonight as well. So that's our panel of experts talking about this film. And let me just first start, we've all watched it, and I know, speaking for myself, learned a lot about Kenny Sailors, learned a lot about his story. Let me start with President Livingstone, you, just your overall thoughts, your initial thoughts having watched this film.
Well, thanks, John. It's a privilege to be here. Well, first, I love the movie. I just thought it was really wonderful from beginning to end. But, for me, one thing that was kind of personal about it, my dad played at about the same time that Kenny Sailors did at Oklahoma A&M. He actually was on their 1945 national championship team, so a couple of years after Sailors. And then my father-in-law played at the University of Wyoming a few years after Sailors played. So it actually brought back lots of memories of stories that they told about playing basketball at that time during the early years of the game and the development of the NCAA and the NBA, because my Brad and my father both played in the NBA as well. So I love that part of it. So it was kind of nostalgic and personal for me in many ways. And then to see the impact that he had on the game that has developed it into what it is today was really fascinating as well.
Those are some great connections. Thanks for that. Coach Mulkey, what are your thoughts having seen it?
What a man. The impact that he had on the game, period, speaks for itself, but what he did for women. And I think you see a lot of fathers do that when they have athletic daughters. He made sure when they were in Alaska that he changed the game for girls in high school there. So he didn't just impact the game because he was the first to, introduce the jump shot. He impacted the women's game as well. And I'm just shocked that I've never heard of him. I could watch that over and over, and I can't wait for it to be released so I can send it to my former coach at Louisiana Tech. He will be glued to the computer watching it.
Well, that's great. Coach Drew, what are your thoughts having seen the movie?
Well, I thought, Jacob, you and Ty did a fabulous job. It was really good. And like Coach Mulkey said, I can't believe I never heard of Kenny before. And you get done watching it. I mean, that's something anyone that knows anything about basketball would be interested in watching. What stood out to me was he was a pioneer in our game with the jump shot, pioneer for what he did for women's sports, and then also just what an outstanding Christian man he was and how many people he impacted. So what a great man.
Good. Hey, Nina, you're the youngest of our group here tonight. What are your thoughts? I'm interested in how this resonated with you tonight.
Yeah. First off, I don't feel as bad. I thought being the youngest one, I was going to be the only one that haven't heard of him. Right. So I feel a little bit better about that. But it was intriguing from beginning to the end, just the way he changed the game, his moral, his values, going to Baylor University, being a Christian university. Not only was he a trailblazer for the jump shot, but how serious he took defense, his ball handling. He went and fought in the war. He has so many layers to him. So it's crazy that so many people haven't heard of him. And so it's just remarkable, his story. And as Coach said, I can't wait to share his story with more people.
Boy, that's great. Hey, Jacob, let me come to you. Jacob is the director of this movie, Jump Shot. There's a lot of sports movies out there. And so it didn't scare you away from doing this. What was it that made you want to tell this story?
Well, when I initially found Kenny's story, or unearthed it, I guess, it was always out there. But what intrigued me immediately was the basketball aspect of it. I mean, the guy invented what we know as the modern day jump shot in basketball, I always thought that existed in the game. And so that immediately captured my attention. But as I began to dive deeper into who is this man, Kenny Sailors, I began to discover these stories that, really showed that he was this, like what everybody has shared tonight, just an amazing man that, was a faithful husband, a loving father, service, dedicated a life of service to, the country and pioneer for women's sports, that I was like, there is so much more here than basketball or a sports documentary. And I think those are what make the best films, are ones that go into like, let's let this be a character driven story versus just some historical perspective of the game.
Hey, Ty, let me come to you. Ty Clark, producer of this movie, and we see that Steph Curry is the executive producer of this movie. How did that relationship, Steph being involved in this, all begin?
A bunch of tiny miracles. And before I start, I first want to congratulate Coach Mulkey and Coach Drew for an incredible basketball season that heartbreakingly for all of us got cut short. I already had my tickets to the Final Four purchased, which I do every year, but I knew that my Baylor Bears would be there this year. And so I'm just going to give you the honorary titles tonight to both of you. And for all of us Baylor Bears fans and Lady Bears fans out there that are just bummed that we didn't get the rest of the season. But like that, crazy things happen in this world. And one of those crazy things for us was Steph Curry. We got introduced to the chaplain for USA Basketball that some of you probably know, Coach Mo, on the screen, who said, I got to share this movie with a couple of the guys on the USA team. And so he said two guys in particular, Steph Curry and Kevin Durant, that he's been discipling for a number of years, are going to love this film. And he showed it to them. And basically they said, man, we want to meet those guys. And so we got to share the film with both of those guys. And the reaction from Steph after he watched the film was, I'd love to do an interview. So we interview Steph. That goes great. And then we get a phone call, I guess it's probably a couple days later, from Steph's team that says, how can we be more involved in this? We love this story. Kenny's pillars of his character are what we stand for, that Steph stands for, that he wants to be like in his life. And he will only choose projects like that to be a part of. How can we be a part in a bigger way? And that's when Steph came on to be an executive producer.
Wow, it's a great story. Not often that Steph Curry calls you, right? Or his people call you, wanting to be a part
that doesn't happen very often.
Of a project. That's great. Coach Mulkey, back to you. So at the beginning of the movie, they're asking some of those players, some NBA guys and some basketball people, Bob Knight's in there. They're asking them if they know who invented the jump shot. I think you spoke to this already. If you'd been asked that question, would you have known the answer to that?
Absolutely not. I would have just thought it evolved as a part of the game, like the hook shot, jump shot, the layup. I would not have. You could have told me Kenny Sailors, and I would not even know who he is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, same here. Coach, how about you? Coach Drew?
Exact same. So, like Nina, I feel a little better. Other people never know it either.
Okay, so I think President Livingstone, I think we're all in agreement here. Those of us, from the Baylor perspective, I don't think any of us really knew his name or knew his impact on the game. The inventor of the jump shot. You would fall in that boat, right?
That's correct. I did not, even though I'd heard stories of that era, I had not heard his name. No.
Even from your dad? I mean,
no.
Yeah.
No, I wish he was still alive. I would ask him. He probably knew him. It might have even played. I tried to figure out if they'd played against each other, either in college or in the pros, and I couldn't tell that they actually had, but he probably knew of him, but I certainly never heard those stories.
Wow. All right. Let me go around the circle again. What do you think the game of basketball, Nina, let me come back to you. What would the game of basketball be like if there was no jump shot? Can you imagine that?
I couldn't, because it's such a part of the game now. We have players that's coming over half court like Stephen Curry that's shooting the basketball now. You have the Trae Youngs of the world. So the game has evolved so much with the jump shots, mid-range and long range. But I guess it would be kind of, as the film was showing, just a lot of passing, a lot of layup. It would definitely be a slower game. Not sure if it'll be as entertaining as it is now, but it's definitely involved a lot, and I can't even imagine the game without the jump shot now.
Coach Mulkey, what about that some of that old vintage film they had in the movie? It really did. I think the comment was made, it looks like they're going in slow motion out there. Defense slow to close out, things like that.
Yeah, the set shot. I just laugh when I see guys shooting set shots, because that's what women were always. People say, "Oh, she's a set shooter." Well, guys were set shooters.
Yeah.
That's what was funny to me watching it, is that there was a lot of cutting, and that's not any different, but just guys with set shots. And I guess the guy, what came to mind in my era was he was ahead of his time, and it made me think of Pistol Pete Maravich.
Yeah.
Pistol Pete Maravich could do things with a basketball that, sure, he worked on it for hours with his dad. Press just drilled him every day, but this guy could do things with a basketball other than shoot a jump shot that was ahead of his time. And I think some guy in the movie said, he was a visionary, and he was. And unfortunately, what's happening now, John, is that he wasn't recognized in the moment, and years passed, and he took off to Alaska to do what? Take care of his wife. His
Right.
wife was his priority, and he was forgotten about. And that's why I tell people, don't put off tomorrow what you can do today to recognize people, because the next generation kind of forgets about you. And that's what you're fighting right now with him going into the Naismith Hall of Fame. And it's our job as women and as men in the Hall of Fame to see that someone like that is recognized.
Boy, great points there. Coach Drew, would there be any other aspect of the game of basketball that would have been more important than, instituting a jump shot? I mean, can you think of anything else that might have been bigger than that to change the game?
Well, you look at it, everybody talked about when dunking the basketball came into effect and how that changed the game. But still, it goes back to what's the most the game-changing shot of the day, and always will be with the three-point line, is the jump shot. And allows originally Kenny came up with it because so he could get a shot up over his taller brother, and the jump shot's the equalizer, allows small people to play. Nowadays, everybody shoots the jump shot. You can be 7 foot, but as long as you have the 3-point shot line in effect, the dunks are great, but the jumper means the most at the end of the day.
Part of the movie was his collegiate coach, Everett Shelton at Wyoming, University of Wyoming. Shout out to Larry Moo, Wyoming, who's ever watching us there tonight. Didn't tell him not to use it. Didn't tell him, hey, you need to rein that in. You can't do that. For our two coaches that are here, Kim, you first. Have you ever had a player that tried something and you said, no, you can't do that, or tried something that was innovative that you thought maybe, hey, that's not bad, keep doing that?
Well, you've got one on the panel here tonight. She can quickly tell you, as an undersized post player, she could do some of the most unorthodox moves in there against bigger players. And they go, how does she do that? And I go, I don't know, but let her keep doing it. You don't change a thing. It's effective. You let them go with it, and they make you look like a great coach.
Yeah.
Yeah, Nina, let's go to you. You did do some things at your size that that folks really haven't seen before. That was really unorthodox, and it was your style and worked really well.
Yeah, and it honestly falls on your coaching staff. When you're playing in college, your coaches become your family, and you trust in them just as they trust in you. And so for a coach to tell you that she's not going to change anything, that makes you more confident in your game. And although it looks unorthodox to you guys or to other people, just like how someone else has worked on their perfect jump shot, I've worked on my unorthodox perfect shot. So to me, it is perfect. So it's normal to me to go up and under. All these things are normal to me. So for him to have a coach that believed in him at that time was great. But as you notice, once he got to, was it the NBA, once the coach tried to change his game, it confused him because that's all he knew. That's all he worked on. And now you're trying to tell him that he can't shoot the jump shot, that won't work. So if you have a coach that told every player that, if someone would have told Steph Curry when he got to the NBA that he can't cross over half court shooting shots, the game would have never changed to what it is. If they told we can't shoot hook shots, we would have never had the hook shot. So every time someone comes up with it, you just have to trust in their player and let them create new things and continue to evolve the game.
That's great. We love your unorthodox shot. We're glad you had it. You made a lot of those during your time at Baylor. President Livingstone, anything from your playing days that might stand out that might have been considered unorthodox, but worked for either somebody that was on your team or somebody you played against?
I played against University of Kansas when Lynette Woodard played for them. And honestly, she was amazing and did things that most women's players at that point in time couldn't do. And so, because she was unbelievably athletic, and obviously they had a very talented team at the time. And so you would watch her do things and think, wow, I wish I could do that. And it was fun to watch. And when you see a player do those kinds of things, it's a real inspiration to other players, particularly younger players that want to imitate someone that they sort of idolize and look up to. And so I think it's a fabulous for the game and has lots of applications far beyond the basketball game as well.
Yeah, along those lines, maybe it's not on the basketball court. Maybe it's somebody that you worked with or work with now here at Baylor. Maybe they're just creative in their own way and it works, and you have to see that and allow that to continue and allow them to run with it.
Absolutely. And, letting people figure out the way they can do a job really well, even if it's different than how you would do it, is a really important skill as a leader to encourage people and to frankly get jobs done better than you could do them yourself.
Coach Drew, along those lines, you've had some guys maybe that had some skills that would be termed unorthodox, but it worked for them. And I guess it's up to you as coaches just to make the most of that.
Well, we got that term at BU, we let you be you. So anyway, if you can do it, you're successful, we're going to let you do it. And we've had Coach Mulkey can tell you with the men and women's program, we've had so many great players over the years that have made us both look like great coaches and had great programs. At the end of the day, I do know that after I finish watching this too, I do want to go back and say what Coach Mulkey brought up about not being in the Hall of Fame, and our job to make sure people recognize what people did in the past. And you look at it when you talk about the best players in the 80s and the 70s and the 60s. He was player of the decade in the 40s. And not only that, Nina, you talked about coaches. I mean, he was the coach too, right? Because coaches couldn't instruct during the game. So that guy could be in multiple facets. So, and I definitely think after this movie comes out, hopefully, and with Coach Mulkey getting in there, hopefully she can work some of the voters when she finds out who they are, or if it's her, we can get that done in the future. So hopefully that's in the near future.
On your shoulders, Coach Mulkey.
Hey, if I ever find out who the voters are, I promise you I'll share it with everybody, because there's a lot of you I'd love to see be in the Naismith Hall of Fame.
Yeah. Ty, you had me going watching the movie. I thought it was building to an ending in which he was selected to the Naismith Hall of Fame. I mean, again, I didn't know his story, but unfortunately that it didn't have that part of a happy ending.
Yeah, that's one of those things that, Jake did so well as a filmmaker and as a director. And he and I would have this conversation because we were still working on the movie during the second run of Kenny possibly getting into the Hall of Fame. And so we're working on the film and we're discussing, well, what if he goes in? How's it going to get in? How are we going to end it? If he doesn't get in, how are we going to end it? Well, and then unfortunately we lost Kenny while we were filming. And so then there's this whole other conversation of, how are we going to actually end this film? Because obviously it'd be great to end on Kenny getting in and the celebration for everybody. But we knew, because we, especially me personally, have had a lot of discussions with the director of the Hall of Fame and the gatekeeper at the Naismith Hall of Fame, and other people, Colangelo, and people connect with the Hall of Fame to know Kenny probably wasn't going to get in. And so, you just have to plan well, and you have to let the story really take control and lead you where it's going to go. And I think Jake did such a masterful job as a director of just letting the story and really letting Kenny tell the story more than us, which was really the big key for Jake in the film, was how can we let Kenny tell his story rather than us forcing anything in that maybe the audience wants to hear, or the things that we hope happens. Like, let's let Kenny be Kenny, because he's larger than life and he's a beautiful man and a role model for everybody. That let's let Kenny tell Kenny's story and let it take it where it goes. So
that's great. Jacob, let me play off that in that it was fun watching Kenny. Always had a smile on his face, always seemed to have a very pleasant personality, fact that he wasn't in the Naismith Hall of Fame, it really didn't seem to bother him. I mean, he said it didn't really matter to him. He seemed like he had a very upbeat, positive attitude about everything.
Yeah, I mean, what you see is what you with Kenny, and we thankfully, we've been able to share this film with some of Kenny's family and closest friends, and they've echoed the same sentiment of like, yeah, I mean, you guys did a fantastic job of capturing our. One of the early screenings we did, we actually had one of Kenny's roommates approach us after the screening, and he had tears in his eyes, and we were just like, oh man, like what's getting ready to happen? And he walked up to Ty and I both like put his hand on our shoulders. It was like, thank you for giving me another 80 minutes with my best friend. And like, it was like, it just, crushed us to hear that. Like beautiful, but also heartbreaking too. But it's just really cool to get to share something like that. But also just piggyback off of what Ty was saying, like I always felt like I wanted Kenny to have the final say, the final word, and what his thoughts were on the Hall of Fame, which is why it ends with him being like, I'm already a part of the greatest Hall of Fame that there ever is. And there's, it's not a selection committee down here. There's one member on the committee, and I'm not worried about these halls of fame that men create. And that for me was always going to be the ending. And then whatever happened after that, we had addressed in the post credits or whatnot. But the Hall of Fame discussion needs to be there, just not because it's the purpose of getting him in. I think it's just a reality of like, this is life. Like we work hard for something and we think maybe we deserve it, but we don't always get what we want. And I think Kenny handles that with an incredible amount of grace that I think everybody can walk away with.
For Nina and Kim and President Livingstone, about halfway through the movie, he retires from playing. He moves to Alaska, as we've said, and you saw in the movie, really for his wife's health. They go to Alaska for her well-being, and then gets involved in coaching and becomes a real pioneer and advocate for women's basketball in Alaska. Nina, how does that resonate with you, that part of it where he was such a proponent for women's basketball?
It's powerful. It's so powerful, and it's just touching because that's something that we're still fighting for right now. As we can see, just not in the sport of basketball, the soccer team right now are still fighting for equal pay. The WNBA are still fighting, trying to break down these walls. And so the fact that he was doing it way back then just shows, again, the character and the layers that he has. Because most people would have went in the gym and they would have coached the men's basketball team and thought nothing of these girls. As he said, they wasn't athletic. One player, she said she was mediocre. She was short. She wasn't good, but he made them believe that they were somebody. And that just shows, again, who he is. He gave them a purpose. So the fact that I think the new term that everyone's using is he was a girl dad. He knew that he had a daughter that was athletic and he wanted everything to be equal. And so that just speaks, again, for his character, and it's just amazing.
Kim, I know you're a big proponent, obviously, for women's basketball, but a historian in that respect as well. I know you can appreciate his impact on women's basketball.
John, I saw the game 3-on-3 or half-court women's basketball one time, and it was a young lady from Atoka, Oklahoma. Dr. Livingstone probably knows, the only one on this panel that knows where Atoka, Oklahoma is. I've never seen anything like it in my life, and I just sat there and watched it. It was a lot more entertaining than what you think it would be. And to think that he went to Alaska, of all places, we're not thinking Alaska. What, Boozer at Duke, I think, was from Alaska, but how many people are great players from Alaska on the men or the women's side? And to think that he took the game to Alaska and basically changed it. And it does take an interest. You either have to have a daughter or a granddaughter or somebody that makes you take that heartfelt interest in the women's sport. And he did. And there were 4 things he said in that film that really speak volumes. The Hall of Fame is not going to define that man. That man has already been defined. When he said God, his wife, being a husband, being a father, and then a Marine, that touched my heart because my father was a Marine. Can you name anything else that a man would want in his life? Hall of Fame would be great, but that's not going to define what I saw in that movie today. Wow.
President Livingstone, I know you played full court basketball, but That video was got really interesting and really stark to watch, wasn't it? The 3-on-3 on one end of the court and 3 on the other end of the court.
Well, I hate to tell you this, John, but in high school, I played 6-on-6.
Oh, you
I hate to tell you,
did.
that ages me. But Oklahoma was the next to the last state to change. I graduated from high school in '78, and they didn't change it till early '80s. And so watching that, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm reliving my high school days. I hated that game. I hated it because I wanted to play both ends of the court. And there's all kinds of things I could say about that. But so the fact that he actually started the game in Alaska as a 5-on-5 game, you could tell from the pictures and everything, in the '70s, long before many states in the country changed. So great credit, because that was the game he knew and nobody else there was playing. So it made a lot of sense. So it was great to see that and to see the impact that he had. But the other thing I thought was really important, and I think Nina mentioned the young woman that talked about how she wasn't very good, but it talked about how he really encouraged the Native Alaskans to play. Yeah. And so girls sports in Alaska had the Native Alaskans playing with everybody else there. I mean, what a champion for diversity as well, not just women, but diversity more broadly, at a time when that, especially, in Alaska, in the small towns, there might not have been the thing to do. You just have to give him tons of credit for being sort of forward thinking about what's important and how we need to engage everybody and take full advantage of everything that they can contribute.
President Livingstone, thank you for your honesty there. I wasn't going to be the one to say, did you play 5-on-5 or did you play 6?
Hey, wait, John, we do have to ask the question. Was she on the offensive end or the defensive end?
Yeah, good question.
I saw the knockout video with her husband and daughter, and she's a pretty good shooter. So which end were you at? Did they put you blocking shots or scoring?
I actually played more defense than I did offense, but there were games where my coach would run me from end to end at timeouts and breaks in the game. So I played on both ends quite a bit, but I was mainly on the defensive end. That was my real expertise.
That's great. Is there video? Does video exist?
I'm hoping not. And if Brad sends you any video, he's dead.
Yes. That's who we're checking with, is Brad. Jacob and Ty, the visual elements of this movie were so impressive. You used some graphics, you used some, just sound like audio recordings of Kenny and his wife. That was very poignant. There were motion graphics and obviously some great old film, transferred to video. You guys mixed all those, I thought, very, very well, Jacob, to tell the story.
Yeah, thank you. As a documentary filmmaker, you'll take whatever you can get, especially when the subject lived in the 40s and 50s. Basketball was not covered very much at that time. So the pickings were slim, and we're thankful that we're able to come across some games that Kenny actually played in. It would be a very different film if we weren't able to see what Kenny was actually doing on the court. And thankfully, his wife saved tons of images and newspaper clippings, scrapbooks on top of scrapbooks. There were over 600 archival assets in the film alone.
Wow.
On top of everything we didn't use, which there was a lot of great stuff in there that just didn't fit in the story. But we kind of went about it every which way we can to make it entertaining and engage our audiences.
And I think the coolest thing for me coming in was the fact that Kenny, because he played basketball, and was in the NBA, so he spent a lot of time in New York when he was in the NBA and in major cities, he had a video camera. Huh. So he had an 8mm and a 16mm. So all of that footage of like he and Mulkey and the kids, Kenny on the ranch doing that's all actual footage that Kenny and Marilyn shot themselves. And even his brother Bud was a photographer. And so when they were at war, there's that photograph outside the plane where they talk about Kenny could have been, at the same time as brother Bud fighting, like Bud took that picture. So there's like all these things that were just, they were magic. You don't uncover that stuff or find that when you're telling a story, like Jake said, from somebody from the 40s, where the family actually has video of everything that's happened. So all that old footage was all Kenny's actual videos and reels from family, which is pretty incredible.
Ty, I'm curious, in a project like this, do you know that exists before you start the process, or as you're going, do you sort of unearth that?
Things got unearthed on every step, because we knew Kenny's archivist. Jake became really good friends with in Wyoming, Bill Schrag, who's in the film. And so Bill was able to build a relationship with Jake and kind of share, the stuff that he had. But then we continued to find more and get stuff from family members and great grandsons and granddaughters and things like that. And we, even after we were done, we got Facebook messages from people in Alaska that said, "Oh, if you need anything, I've got old VHS tapes of Kenny coaching the girls teams." And we're going, "Oh, where were you a year ago?"
Wow.
So it's pretty fascinating.
Yeah. And then it becomes, Jacob, how do you get it all in, or what do you use, or what do you leave out?
Fit 90 years of a 80-minute film. It's a challenge. And so, yeah, I mean, there are a lot of things that, left on the cutting floor. We would have loved to include it in the film, but we just didn't have the time. It didn't work with the pacing. One thing that, if you stop and think about it, Wyoming actually would have probably won a whole nother second national championship after returning from World War II, because the entire team returned. They were ranked first in their division, in their conference, but graduate students couldn't play in the NCAA tournament that year, so they didn't, receive that award. And you don't think about, professional basketball didn't exist in 43 prior to World War II, and they beat the AAU champions, Phillips 66, which we don't really talk about in the film because it would get too confusing. But the NIT champions, they beat the service team champions. They literally were the world champions in basketball. It's pretty crazy.
And for both you guys, I love the graphic where you kind of froze the shot, him, up in the air, with the one-hand jump shot, and you compared it to other guys. Pistol Pete Maravich, Kim, you mentioned him, to Michael Jordan and others. It's uncanny how similar that motion was for all those guys.
Yeah, and I had to throw in my favorite players in that graphic. So I made sure that I had each of my favorite guys in that graphic when we put it together. So I knew I had to have Pistol Pete in there for sure. I knew I had Mike and Reggie, and but those are the fun things you get to have with something like that, is you want to compare it to other things, because obviously this could draw an older crowd, because the story is this Americana story that has so many deep themes, but also a lot of history. And a lot of times the younger crowd doesn't really want to jump in on that. And so one of the things that Jake and I would discuss all the time are, what are these ways that we can bring the younger audiences in? Because younger audience need to hear the story, especially athletes, men and women athletes need to hear the story, because of these character themes that a professional athlete and an innovator of the game lived for, that are so different than a lot of athletes that we look up to and put posters on our walls today of. And that's one of the things Jake and I talked a lot about, is how do we draw in the younger audience to really understand and grasp these themes? So you have to get creative sometimes.
Only thing missing was Nina Davis freeze frame and her jump shot. Nina, you know what I'm talking about?
No, little amnesia,
Hey, Jacob, what was the most challenging part of doing this film, and what was the most rewarding part of it?
I mean, the length of the project. I started this in 2011. So, we're 9 years this September from when I first went and interviewed Kenny. And so a lot of life has happened. I have a little bit more gray in my beard. It's been a joy the whole way, but just keeping this thing moving, because there are definitely times I didn't think I'd ever see the light at the end of the tunnel. But we finally made it, and we're here. And I think this is the most rewarding part about it, is getting to share this inspiring story about this incredible man finally with the world. Like, this is something, I've been talking about this with all of my friends and my peers for forever. Yeah, I'm doing this documentary about the guy who invented the jump shot. People are like, yeah, that's cool. But now people are getting to see, the impact that not only he had on me, but on everybody else that he interacted with. And so for me, like, those are my two big takeaways for your questions that you asked.
Ty, how about you?
I mean, for me, I mean, as a basketball player whose career was cut short trying to play overseas due to injuries, I had that abrupt ending to basketball. And I think once I came back into the picture, I mean, my last year of basketball was 99. Then I come on with Jake 5.5, 6 years ago. And I was able to bring my network from the basketball world into the film. So I went after my heroes first, Bobby Knight, Lou Carnesecca, Jay Billis, who didn't make the cut.
I'll go ahead and make the public apology here now that we just didn't know how to interact with Kenny's story when people weren't familiar with it at the time. I've been meaning to say that for a while.
Yeah, but there were guys that I went after that were my heroes from when I was a kid and playing. And then, for me, it was just kind of like this closure coming back into the game and, getting to hang out with guys. I mean, sitting at Coach Knight's house for 5 hours and doing a 3.5-hour interview. And then he just wanted to hang out. And so we just hung out and talked basketball. And because he and I have mutual relationships in the basketball world. So, what you played for, so it's basketball stuff. You know how it is. It's all the old school guys are talking about who they played with and coached and talked to. And then the same thing happened with Jay at his house. All of a sudden it was like, oh, wait, hold on. And then, the things are moving. And so I think that was just so fun to be able for me to kind of jump back into the basketball world all these years later and just, achieve a few little dreams I had when I was 12 years old, hanging out with these guys that I looked up to. And I mean, it's such a joy. And I think the biggest takeaway is I would have never known how incredible this man, Kenny Sailors, was and what an inspiration he is to me spiritually, as a husband, as an uncle, as somebody in a community like Waco, mentoring young people, artists, filmmakers, whatever. I mean, just the impact he's had on my life was like, I just got another John Wooden thrown in my way. That was somebody that inspired me when I was younger, that my dad, he's a John Wooden guy, basically. And it's like, why is he not as known as John Wooden? So there's so many takeaways, but just the love of, man, I want to be like this man when I am 60, 70, 80 years old.
A lot to admire, a lot to appreciate there. Let's go around the horn and then wrap things up. President Livingstone, what is it that will stick with you from knowing this story about Kenny Sailors, about knowing his impact, not on just the game of basketball, but, the way he lived his life?
Well, I think that's what you really take away from this is, I mean, he was such a deep and thoughtful person. His faith was so important to him. He loved his family, and those things mattered more to him than basketball. But I think part of it's because he really wanted to excel at anything that he did. Basketball happened to be that first thing, but the other things he did in life, he made such a huge impact and a difference in so many people's lives. And it does help you to understand how many people there are out there that are impacting dozens and hundreds and thousands of lives that we never will know about, but they're making a huge and powerful difference in the world.
Wow. Kim, what'll stick with you from this?
Well, several things. One, Kurt Gowdy, was it Kurt that called him a rattlesnake?
Yeah.
Well, he didn't call him a rattlesnake for any other reason other than when he got on that court, buddy, he would come at you. Yeah. And I loved that. But I think the thing that will stand out to me the most is so many people talk about their priorities in life. God, husband, father, Marine. He lived it. We can talk about it, but how many men would shut it all down and take off to Alaska for his spouse? Not many. He lived it. And that's why the Hall of Fame probably, like he said, I'd love to be in the Hall of Fame, but it's not going to define him. His life defined him as a man. And that's what I said when we opened up this panel tonight. What a man. I think there's a song, what a man, what a man. He's a man. And he's everything you'd want your daughter to be married to, because that was a man I saw in that film today.
Wow. Coach Drew, a lot to admire and emulate, really, about Kenny Sailors.
Well, when I first knew we were going to do this, you're going into it thinking you're going to find out someone that invented the jump shot. And then when you get done watching it, the jump shot was great, but that was way down on the list of priorities as far as, I mean, anyone that watches this, they're going to be inspired because you got a great role model. And what Kim said about as far as living his life, through his actions and living out his priorities in a manner that he not only stated but did. And coaches, I mean, you coach so you can serve, so you can inspire, you can motivate, and he did all that. So anyone that watches this movie, you laugh, you cry, you think, you leave a better person. So I'm glad that you guys did this. And I think, as he said, he's in the greatest Hall of Fame and the only one that matters at the end of the day. But hopefully through your two's work, we can get him in that other Hall of Fame with Coach Mulkey as well.
There you go. All right, Coach Mulkey, on your back. Nina Davis, you're one of the young people that these guys were, trying to bring in and interest in this story and in this movie. What is it that stands out in your mind that you'll remember most about this?
I think, honestly, it changes my mindset of things. It's kind of, as Ty said, as a young generation, it's kind of hard to reach my age. I think Kevin Durant even said in the movie, we're millennials. And we sometimes live in a generation of social media. We're living in a world of, what did you do for me today? Is it any footage? Is it in YouTube videos? And there's so many people that have paved the way for us that we don't really know about and we don't care about. Like, yes, we might not know Kenny, but it's so many other huge players that have changed the game, or just people in general. And if you ask people my age who they are, we don't know, because we don't take the time to go back into history. Yes, don't get me wrong, Kevin Durant, the Russell Westbrook, Steph Curry, they are amazing. But you also have to realize that those players studied somebody to become who they are. And if you're really a fan of the game, it's kind of what I'm learning just from watching films like this, the Michael Jordan documentaries and different things like that's on, that we don't really know who they are. I know who these people were, maybe because my parents watched them growing up. But we never take the time to go back into history and to try to figure these things out for ourselves. And honestly, going back on a story like this, it tells you who you should be on the court and off the court. It's kind of, as Coach said, a lot of people always preach things that they'll do, but they don't really live it. People say, I'm a man of God and I will do these things, but their actions are totally different. So he not only changed the game there, but he showed you how you should be a man, how that you should take these responsibilities. And it's bigger things than life than basketball. I think the one quote that he said that I really liked is he said he gave the game a life. He don't know where he would be. And that's kind of what I always tell people. I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you guys without the game of basketball. But then someone said, no, you gave the game of basketball so much. And I think that's just something that you should live by, that even though the game gave me so much, it's your responsibility to give back to the younger generation, to spread this story and to let them know that it's more than life than just the orange ball.
Wow. Well said, Nina. Very good. Well, Jacob, Ty, congratulations to you guys. I know it's been a long process to get here, and congratulations to you finally, putting it out and having it out there. And I think you hear from this panel tonight, Jacob, how much we appreciate you guys and your hard work in telling Kenny Saylor's story.
Thank you, guys. Really appreciate the opportunity to get to share the film with you all. And thanks for giving us the time to participate in this conversation. This is awesome. Like, this is the joy of being a filmmaker, of getting to have something out there and create a discussion, have a conversation with everybody. So this is a true treat. Thank you.
Great. Ty, well done. Good work.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure to do something in your own backyard with your people.
Great.
Hey, like your shirt, Ty, too.
Oh, of course, you know it.
There you go. Well, appreciate you guys. Ty Clark is a producer. Ty is from Waco. Jacob Hamilton is the director. We've also been joined by President Linda Livingstone, the president of Baylor University, Kim Mulkey, the Naismith Hall of Famer, who's going to get Kenny Saylor's in the Hall of Fame, Coach Scott Drew, Baylor men's basketball coach, and Nina Davis, former Baylor standout. Thanks to Matt Burchett from Baylor Student Activities for making this all happen. And y'all be safe. Great to visit with you. God bless you. And great story. It's great to know the story of Kenny Saylor's in the movie Jump Shot. Everybody have a great night and be safe.
Good job, guys.
Thank you.
Bye, Nina.